everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mukhtaar and I talk about books. Today I'm talking about a very special book, going to be discussing in detail a really wonderful book that had long been on my reading radar. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that it was also in my book haul, I think a few videos ago. I tend to buy a lot of books at the same time and then I slowly get to them over the year. It is none other than Beloved by Toni Morrison. And it broke my heart into a million pieces. So, Beloved won the 1988 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. It's about a black former slave family whose Cincinnati home is haunted by a malevolent spirit. And as it turns out, the malevolent spirit is actually the murdered daughter of the main character, a daughter that she herself murdered to save from a life of bondage. So in the house you have Seth. I think it's pronounced Sethe, but can I just call her Seth? It's just so much easier to roll off the tongue. But I think it's pronounced Sethe, I think. So anyway, you have Seth, who is like a middle-aged woman. You have Grandma Suggs, who is Seth's mother-in-law, and you have the 18-year-old Denver, who's Seth's daughter. And they live in the house, and the house is haunted. So Seth also had two sons who have presumably, in the beginning of the novel, run away because of the ghost. And the ghost is, because it's believed to be the ghost of Seth's late daughter, the ghost is kind of mischievous and kind of evil and childlike and wants attention. And actually I have to say, the first couple of chapters I actually found really frightening. I don't know if that was the intended purpose of the author, but I was really, really freaked out. I had trouble sleeping at night. So then the story progresses, and a man named Paul D, he's somebody that Seth knew from her previous life on a slave plantation called Sweet Home, which is ironically named because the place was a complete hellhole. But anyway, Paul D is somebody that she knew before. He chances upon her house, and they begin a relationship and they start living together. And Paul D is able to drive the ghost away. However, in her place materializes a young girl who calls herself Beloved, whose skin is described as glistening, and who appears to have not worked a day in her life because her skin is smooth and she doesn't have the cuts and the bruises and everything that slaves at that time commonly had, because obviously the work they were made to do. So her skin glistens and it's baby soft, and she's exactly the same age that Seth's daughter would have been had she lived, had she not been killed by her mother. So everybody, Seth, Denver, everybody believes, well, by everybody I mean basically these two, believe that Beloved is the reincarnated version of the murdered daughter, and they start treating her as such. So Seth, who is, mother, murderer, she's very much at the heart of this story. So she takes Beloved in and she starts kind of lavishing her with affection, and this young girl kind of just appears to almost swell. They start a sort of really disturbing symbiotic relationship. So Beloved starts almost feeding off emotionally, in terms of food, in terms of affection, in terms of work. She starts feeding off Seth, trying to take what one can imagine she did not get as a child because she didn't get her mother's love, right? I mean, what she assumes. And you also start getting glimmers into what Seth's life had previously been. So there is this concept that Seth refers to as rememory in the novel. She refers to this concept, rememory, again and again. And in her mind, you can describe it almost as if, acts of great evil and cruelty, they never really die. It's almost as if places, people, and even ghosts absorb them. And, places especially, and then you can sort of stumble upon them if you're really looking. Also, in Seth's mind, it's like, it's like a twisted reliving of the trauma that you've been through, because you can't really escape from what was done to you. And there's this wonderful line that I would like to share with you. I marked it out. So before I forget, let me find my glasses. And it is, leave before Seth could make her realize that worse than that, far worse, was what baby Suggs died of. What Ella knew, what Stamp knew, and what made Paul D tremble. That anybody white could take your whole self for anything that came to mind. Not just work, kill, or maim you, but dirty you. Dirty you so bad you couldn't like yourself anymore. Dirty you so bad you forgot who you were and couldn't think it back up. And though she and others lived through and got over it, she could never let it happen to her own. The best thing she was her children. Whites might dirty her all right, but not her best thing, her beautiful, magical best thing, the only part of her that was clean. She's talking about her daughter, who she killed, because, as you get deeper into the novel, you realize that Beloved is not just the reincarnated, if you like, version of her dead daughter. Beloved is she's used kind of like a metaphor, as a symbol by Toni Morrison, because there's instances in the novel where Beloved is described as having, flashbacks of having different memories, flashbacks of being on a ship, kind of being below deck, suffocating because the air is really close and there's lots of slaves around her, and then the sea is making her sick. She has flashbacks of drowning, of being maimed, memories which aren't really her own, you see, memories which could not possibly have belonged to the child, to the infant that was murdered. So Beloved is described kind of as the culmination of hundreds of years of suffering inflicted by the white man on the African race, and kind of the unspeakable, inhumane terrors and cruelty that was visited upon them. And in this context, you understand why Seth had to kill her children, why it wasn't a choice. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, obviously, but you do understand it. Some people, we were all taught it's very easy to sit in a privileged position and think that, this is right or wrong, and whatever else, what have you. But the fact of the matter is, some people genuinely don't have a choice. So you really understand why it was necessary for her to do what she did. She slits the throat of her eldest daughter. She kind of bludgeons her two sons. They end up surviving, but she leaves them for dead. And she's just about to kill her youngest daughter when the sheriff sort of comes in and he stops her. You see, Seth had run away from the plantation earlier. She had run away with her children and kind of crossed the river. It was an actual river, it wasn't a metaphor. She'd crossed the river and she thought she was safe, but her slave master at Sweet Home, he tracked her down and he found her. And there's this line in the book where she says that, I had to put my babies where they couldn't get them. She feels she's done her duty as a mother, because under the laws of the time, the slave masters, they pretty much owned everybody. So the children that the slaves had were also technically property of the white master. So there are descriptions in the novel of generations of black mothers who didn't look at their own children because they were afraid of getting attached, because whenever the white master wanted, he could just draw up a bill of sale and he could sell the children and they'd never see them again. So they were afraid of, they had to maintain what you would call a tin heart, which is actually what the character Paul D in the novel does. He maintains a tin heart. He doesn't let anything penetrate his rough exterior. He kind of he lives life in a kind of, recurrent death of sorts, because he's not allowed himself to feel anything. So, motherhood is a great theme in the novel. And the reader is led to believe that the white man had usurped what you might call as the most fundamental human right? The right of a mother to love her child. And if you've read, Sapiens, you'd know that I think the bond between mother and child is about 400 million years old, while the bond or the concept of a father didn't even arise until fairly recently, if you consider the millions of years of human history. So so the bond between a mother and child precedes what you would even consider human nature. So it's the most basic right that has been usurped. Because, even animals have the right to love and protect their offspring. I've seen those lionesses on National Geographic, how deadly they become when their cubs are threatened. And, in many ways, what the white man did was not just usurping the identity of the black people, but also distorting it. If you've read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I read it a long time ago when I was in school. He describes how, the white surname was given to all of the slaves to signify that they were the white man's property. And Malcolm X actually put X as his surname to signify that he had no white master. There's this really sad bit in the novel which made me cry, which I'd like to mention. Paul D, the character, there's this passage in the novel in which he describes being jealous, being envious of a rooster, like a chicken, because he thinks that the rooster is free while he is not, and he sees the rooster when he's being transported, and there's a bit in his mouth like a horse bit, it's made of iron and everything, and he can't move his tongue, and he can't breathe, and he can't swallow. And in that moment, he thinks that the rooster is far better off than he is, because he's, so it's the worst degradation that even an animal, shouldn't be put through. And I'm going to read that passage. I think I marked it. It's a beautiful passage. Mr. was allowed to be and stay what he was, but I wasn't allowed to be and stay what I was. Even if you cooked him, you'd be cooking a rooster named Mr. But wasn't no way I'd ever be Paul D again, living or dead. Schoolteacher had changed me. I was something else, and that something was less than a chicken sitting in the sun on a tub. Going back to the murder that's at the heart of it, which of course is everybody discusses that when they talk about Beloved. Morrison is, of course, uninterested in notions of right or wrong. And in fact, I don't know if I already mentioned this, she actually took the inspiration for the novel from a real life incident that had happened. A slave woman named Margaret Garner, I believe in 1856, she ran away from a plantation and she tried to kill her own children. And it was a real life incident, and there was a lot of news coverage and everything around it. And Morrison read this somewhere, and she sort of started imagining, what if I wrote a novel about it? What if I fictionalized the entire psychology and suffering and mindset and everything else of this woman and brought it to life? For Seth, the main character, Beloved is her favorite. She loves her, and there's this line in the novel: "If I hadn't killed her, she would have died." And Paul D, who's living with her, he sort of leaves her, and he says, "You're a beast for trying to kill your own children. Your love, it's too much, it's too thick." And she says what is probably my most favorite line in the novel. She says, "Love is or it ain't. Thin love ain't no love. Or thin love is no love." And that's pretty much, that sums up the book in a way, if you really think about it. This book is it's a treatise to a mother's love, a mother's devotion, and the ultimate sacrifice that only a mother can do, because it's not an easy read. It's not an easy read. If you're depressed, probably don't read it. Or as my own personal methods would denote, sometimes, when you're sad, you need to make yourself sadder. You need to get it out of your system. You need to make yourself as sad as possible so that there's nothing to feel anymore, or fear for that matter. So yeah, whether you're depressed or not depressed, give Beloved a read. I think you'll be haunted by it for many years to come. Beloved by Toni Morrison, people. If you've already read it, I have many wonderful, well-read people in my audience. Please leave your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. I read all of them. I'd love to discuss it with you. And until next time, take care of yourselves.